Hello, my name is Emma, and in today's video, I am going to answer your questions on what is the difference between by and with. Many students make mistakes with by and with. So in today's lesson, I'm hoping to help you with this so you won't make so many mistakes and you'll understand what are the differences between these two words. Okay, so to start with, I have here some questions. I want you to think which ones are correct and which ones are not correct. I also want you to think which sentences, why are they correct? Okay, so why are they correct and why are they incorrect? So my first sentence, I learn English by watching Engvid. Compare this to, I learn English with watching Engvid. Which one do you think is the correct form? Do we use by or do we use with? You said, I learn English by watching Engvid. You are correct. Okay, and I will explain why in the next part of this video. So I learn English with watching Engvid. No, we don't use that. Okay, what about the next two? I write with a pen. I write by a pen. Which one do you think is the correct sentence? And which one is incorrect and why? Okay, if you said I write with a pen, you are correct. In this case, this is the correct one. And I write by a pen, this is incorrect. So before we talk about some of the differences, let's talk about the similarities. How are by and with the same? Well, they both answer the question how. Okay, so they're both the answer to the question how. How do you learn English? I learn English by watching Engvid. I learn English by reading my dictionary every night. That's probably not a good idea, but I learn English by talking to people. Okay, so that's answering how you do something. Similarly with, it also answers the question how. How do you write? Well, I write with a pen. How do you eat dinner? I eat dinner with a fork, okay? Or I eat dinner with chopsticks. So they both answer the same question, how, but they are a little bit different. So let's look at these differences now. Okay, so let's look at some example sentences with by. I turn on the computer by pushing the on button. Okay, so this is again answering the question how. How do you turn on the computer? Well, I turn on the computer by pushing the on button. I want you to take a moment to look at this sentence. What comes after by? We have here pushing. Pushing is a verb, okay? So I'm just going to underline this. So we often use, after by, we often have a verb when we're explaining how something is done. Let's look at another example. I keep healthy by exercising. So again, after by, you'll notice we have a verb, exercise. Okay, in this case, it's exercising. So one of the first things to notice is after by, we often have a verb. So I have here by, verb, but that's not all. If you look at the verb, what form is the verb in? Well, take a moment. What do pushing and exercising have in common? They both end in ing. So I'm going to write here ing. Okay, so we use by. After by comes a verb, and then comes ing. How do you keep clean? I keep clean by showering. How do you study? I study by, not hanging out with my friends. That would be terrible for studying. I study by reading over my notes. Okay, so after by, we have the verb and ing. So let's do one together. I learned karate, or karate, by. So, and I have here YouTube. What do you think the verb would be? We could say by watch. Is that right? By watch YouTube? No, we need the ing. Perfect. I learned karate by watching YouTube. Okay, so again, this is very useful because anytime you're explaining how, if you have a verb and by, then you can explain how you do something. Okay, now let's look at some more differences between with and by. So before I begin teaching you more about by and with, I just want to say that these are the general rules. And there are always times in English when rules are broken or when there are exceptions, okay? And so these are the most basic of the rules with by and with. Okay, so now let's look at when we're talking about a noun. We've just talked about using by with a verb ending in ing to answer how to do something. Well, we can also talk about how by using a noun. So to remind you what a noun is, it's usually a person, a place, a thing, or maybe an idea. So let's look at some examples. Before we get to some examples, one of the major rules when we come to by is we often use it with communication, okay? So when we're talking about how we communicate, we usually use by. We also use by a lot when we're talking about transportation. There are also a lot of other exceptions, but the main ones that I want you to know for now is when we're talking about transportation and communication. So for example, I will contact you by email. Email is an example of a noun, okay? So this is not a verb. In this case, this is a noun. I will contact you by email. And email is a form of communication. We could change this to I will contact you by phone. I will contact you by messenger. I will contact you by pigeon. That would never happen, but just an example of what I mean by communication. I will message you by text. Okay, so again, these are communication based. Then we use by for transportation when we're talking about nouns. So what are some examples of nouns for transportation? We have buses, subways, bikes, boats, airplanes, ferries, okay? These motorcycle, taxi, Uber. These are all forms of transportation, and they're all nouns. So we can use by when we're talking about these nouns. I will go by bus. I came by car. You'll also notice something. When we use by, and we're using a noun, we don't usually have the article there. So I don't say I will go by a bus or I came by a car. It's usually without any article. I will go by bus. So there's no the, no here. I will go by subway. I will go by airplane. I will go by bike. Okay? So again, we often use by with nouns when we're talking about communication or transportation. And then there are some other times we talk about them, various exceptions also, but this is the main rule. So now let's look at how. I mean, not how, with. Let's look at with. Okay, so now let's talk about with. So just like by, with answers the same question. How do you do something? Okay, so the question is how. So I have here some examples. How do Italians talk? Well, you know, they talk in different ways, but Italians talk with their hands, for example. How do you point? I point with my fingers, okay? So these are some examples with. So when we were talking about by, we looked at by followed by a verb and followed by nouns. And we talked about how the nouns usually have to do with communication or transportation. With we use it usually with a noun. So again, a noun is a person, place, or thing. Like hands is a noun, fingers is a noun. And we usually use with, and again, I'm saying usually because there's a lot of other cases we use it, but this is the main rule. We use with body parts, when we're talking about tools or different instruments, okay? So for example, Italians talk with their hands. So we have with here, and we have a body part, hands. Maybe, you know, people who are deaf often talk with their hands. I point with my fingers. I point with my toes. Okay, so again, we have another body part, fingers. I think with my brain. I smile with my teeth and lips. I run with my legs. Okay, so we use it for body parts. We can also use it when we're talking about tools or instruments. So when I'm talking about instruments, I'm talking about things we use. I cleaned the floor. How? How did you clean the floor? Well, I cleaned the floor with a mop. So a mop is like a tool or an instrument. You can say I cleaned the floor with a broom. I cleaned the floor with a dustpan. I ate dinner with a fork. So this is answering, how did you eat dinner? I ate dinner with chopsticks. I ate dinner with a spoon. Okay. How did you cook? I cooked with a microwave. I cooked with a pot. I cooked with an oven. How did you camp? I camped with a tent. So we use this a lot of the times when we're talking about body parts, tools, or instruments, things that help you do things. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've covered by with verbs, we've covered by with nouns, and we've covered with nouns. So I want to invite you to come check out our website at www.engvid.com. There you can actually do a quiz to practice everything you learned in this video, okay? There's a lot of information here, so I really hope you practice these things. I also want to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. There you can find a lot of other resources about grammar, pronunciation, conversation, listening, and all things English. So until next time, thank you for watching and take care.